What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another Shadowlands video. How are you all doing? I miss your lovely faces. Grab your coffee. We've got another interesting video today. I actually want to talk. I mean, I always talk a lot. I talk way too much. I know that, but I think there's some really important things we got to talk about. First of all, I'm going to talk about the tuning changes that are coming, which are really, really great for the game. That's number one. Number two, we're going to get into like some of the implications of things like the meta in this game. We're going to look at some of these rankings over here. I want to look at this in a minute. We're going to look at as well the raid rankings, and I want to talk about how things like the Mythic Plus rankings and the raid rankings create information that gets disseminated down into all the player base and actually creates, in some ways, a toxic environment for this game. And it all kind of comes back to the tuning changes that Blizzard's going to make, but I do want to make sure that we understand some of this stuff. This is the larger discussion that I want to have, is in these two ideas here, excuse me. But also, this is a good direction for the game to be going. So grab your coffee, sit back and relax. This is a really important video, in my opinion, and one that I want to talk about this as much as possible, and I want to talk about it in the comments down below with you guys. So please, 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 if you've never commented on a video before, then comment on this one, because I think the implications are so huge and they're so important, and I want to hear what you guys have to say about some of this stuff. So let's start with the news first, and then we'll get into kind of my bigger argument in a second here, okay? So number one, there are class tuning changes happening in 9.2.5. First of all, there's Tank Threat, which is really great. Beast Mastery, Windwalker, and Arms. If we look over here really quickly, you can see that the classes that they are buffing, Arcane Mage is in there as well. We've got Arcane Mage, Arms Warrior, Beastmaster Hunter, Outlaw Rogue. Those all got buffed. So I mean, Blizzard might be paying attention to some of these metrics that are being measured, and if so, that's good. It's definitely not bad that they're buffing the worst performing classes, quote unquote, which again, I'm going to get into why I hate that terminology in a minute. But it's just good that Blizzard's looking at this and they're making changes based on what is the perceived sort of last place classes here, okay? So, number one, all classes now generate more threat while in tank specialization. We've heard lots of feedback about the loss from the community since the start of the season. Our design intent is that a tank who is actively directing their damage at an enemy should be able to maintain threat on that enemy. But simple area of effect spells like Consecrate or Death and Decay should not be sufficient. So this is a good change. I mean, tanks always traditionally have struggled with threat late into an expansion because everybody right now in this expansion has a 4-piece tier set. They have double legendaries. They have maxed out Covenant stuff. I mean, the damage is outrageous, right? So to compete with that kind of threat that's being generated from the damage, tanks just can't compete with it generally. So it's good that they're adding more threat. That's really good. And that sounds like it's going to be permanent moving into 10.0. So maybe this won't be as much of a massive struggle in the next expansion. Here's the buffs that are coming, okay? Here's BM Hunter. All damage and pet damage increased by 4%. That's important, right? Because things like Cobra Shot are not pet damage. Most of BM's damage is pet damage, but it's good to see that all damage, including pet damage, is up by 4%. Beast Cleave got a slight buff, which is good. That's most of your AoE damage is Beast Cleave. Beast Mastery has not received as much of an AoE benefit from its set bonuses as other specs like Survival Hunter or Marksman Hunter. Marksman Hunter is all about Trick Shot, which is AoE. Consequently, they've fallen behind. We're increasing the damage of their pet spell, which is great. So that's good. Buff number one, good. Arcane Mage, 8% on missiles, 10% on blast. Clear casting can no longer be dispelled. That's purely a PvP buff. But again, they're just getting more damage. This is some of their two most common abilities that they're going to be pressing. So this is a PvE buff and a PvP buff, which is really great. Frost had its Necrolord conduit nerfed by, I think I was talking to somebody about this, and they think it's only about 7 seconds that it'll take off this, so maybe it's actually not that big of a deal. That's the Deathborn one. Yeah, they're saying it's regularly like 50 plus seconds, so they want to scale that back. The conduit itself only adds like 30 seconds or something. So 33% of the conduit is like maybe 7, 7, 14, 21. It's like 8, 16, 32. It's like 7.5 seconds, something like that. 8, 16, 20. Maybe it's more. Maybe it's like 9 seconds. Anyway, that's the point. It's maybe about 9 seconds or so. Mistweaver. Reduce the cooldown on Zen Focus Tea. I think that's a PvP talent. So let's move on from that. Windwalker. This is amazing. Rising Sun Kick, 20%. Fist of Fury to the primary target, 20%. Blackout Kick, 20%. Tiger Palm, 20%. Fist of the White Tiger, 20%. These are all single target abilities, which is exactly what Windwalker needs. They don't need a buff to their AoE. Their AoE is perfectly fine. They're taken in almost every single Mythic Plus group. So, really, really great to buff their single target, because on raid bosses in particular, you can see, obviously, with the ranking over here, if you look at, I think it's this one, Windwalker Monk's like literally at the bottom, right? Literally at the bottom of the raid. Again, judging by, this is the 95th percentile. I'm going to get into all that stuff in a second, but they're perceived to be pretty bad in single target damage. And I think they do have bad single target damage. So this is a wonderful change for them. Really wonderful change. So far it's been Arcane Mage PvE buff, Beastmaster PvE buff, Windwalker single target buff, Discipline, dull PvP stuff, Rogue. Here we go. Outlaw Rogue, Between the Eyes, 20%, Pistol Shot, 20%, Sinister Strike, 20%, 20% damage to all their single target abilities, and Blade Flurry damage up by 10%, which means, if you don't know how Outlaw Rogue works, Outlaw Rogue simply presses Blade Flurry, and then they use all of their single target abilities. So this is like a double dipping of a buff, right? Blade Flurry damage goes up, so your AoE damage is higher, and all your single target abilities that you're using when Blade Flurry is up are also buffed. So this is a massive buff to Outlaw Rogue. And I wanted, their note here is really important. So our intent with these changes is to improve Outlaw Rogue in both single target and 5 to 6 target cleave situations, which the 6 target doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because Blade Flurry only adds 4 targets for five targets in total. I'm not really sure what this. The 6 is maybe talking about Blade Rush, which is that talent. Anyway, I'm not really sure why they put 6 in there, but our intent is to improve single target and 5 to 6 target cleave situations where Blade Flurry should shine. Outlaw isn't standing out enough in these moments, and we hope that these changes move it in the right direction. So this is leading into my later argument, which is to say that certain classes are good at certain things in this game, and that should not change. I heard a bunch of people crying out about, like, Outlaw Rogue needs to just have... They're the only class without uncapped AoE in the game. The only spec with no uncapped AoE. And that's, like, only partially true. Enhancement Shaman, for example, Chain Lightning doesn't... is capped at, like, 4 targets, which is a big part of your AoE damage. Yes, things like Sundering and Crash Lightning are uncapped, but not in the same way that, like, a Windwalker Monk is uncapped. My Crash Lightning has to hit like a very specific area, and then all my subsequent attacks have to hit all enemies in sort of a cone in front of me. So it's very specific AoE. Even Survival Hunter AoE, you have to have all the mobs grouped up together. Here's my point. My point is simply to say that there should be classes that are good at like 5 to 6 target cleave, which is Enhancement Shaman would be one of those. They're very good at that. I think Outlaw Rogue is now, I think, has traditionally been very good at that. There should be moments where you see an Outlaw Rogue pumping more damage than like a Survival Hunter because the pack size isn't 10 to 20 guys, right? There's actually, I have an awesome video here from, I'm just going to show a quick video of an Outlaw Rogue here. Here's a smaller pack, right? There's only about 4 or 5 guys here. 4 guys. Plus the canister. And the Outlaw Rogue is getting up there. You can see in the bottom corner, he's the top damage now. He's doing 19k. Almost 20k DPS. So, oh, you can't see it because my stupid camera. I'll move it over here. See the details over here? So you can see the details. He's doing almost 20k in a pull where he should be doing a high amount of damage because Outlaw Rogue should be able to do it. You can see Demon Hunter and the Death Knight, which have better uncapped AoE, are not doing as much damage here in this situation. Now, I would argue that there are many situations where you are forced to do capped AoE. For example, the midsection of Mists of Tyrannus Scythe has all kinds of mobs that are like packs of 4 to 6 mobs. That's all you can do. You can't pull more. You can do some Warlock shenanigan things maybe and pull some extra stuff from the side, but generally speaking, most of the time you can't do more. Theater of Pain, the Zav portion of Theater of Pain, it just has a bunch of mini bosses, and you can pull them together, but you still are only going to have like maybe 2 to 5 to 6 enemies at a time. You're not going to have 10 to 20 enemies. Halls of Atonement, certainly you can have that many, but there are so many examples. Spires of Ascension, when you're jumping from platform to platform, generally speaking, you're fighting mobs, packs of 5 to 6, and you don't need to squish all of those packs together and burn them all down in a big AoE clump. You don't have to do that. You can take them one pack at a time. You can go this pack of 6, into this pack of 6, into this pack of 6. This idea of uncapped AoE being mandatory on every class, I just completely disagree, and I think that people need to stop saying that. There needs to be some identity within the classes. If there isn't, then we're all just literally playing the exact same thing. We all have uncapped AoE. We all have a kick. We all have a stun. We all have this. We all have a defensive. That's the exact same. Those things need to be different. It gives the game some variety. It gives the game some variance, which makes the game a lot more fun. You really don't want a game where it's literally everybody has the exact same thing. They're just in a different color. You see what I'm saying? So these changes are a massive buff to Outlaw Rogue. Obviously in the single target arena, but in their AoE damage, it's going to go way up because it's buffing their single target and their AoE, which they push all their single target damage into their AoE. That's how it works. So this is a really, really big change that is going to be massive for Outlaw Rogue. And of course, the public perception of Outlaw Rogue is that they're way at the bottom because they're down at the bottom of this chart once again. And I'm going to deal with the public perception thing in a minute. That's about it. I don't think... Oh, Arms Warrior as well. I'm sorry. Arms Warrior gets a slight buff. Mortal Strike damage by 10%. Overpower damage by 10%. Execute by 15%. And Condemn if you're going to play Venthyr. That's insane. 15%, 10%, 10%. That's really good. That's a lot of their damage, especially the Overpower buff because of their tier set now. And you can take the talent that gives you a second charge of Overpower. So that's really good. These changes are intended to increase ARM's single target performance while not affecting areas where they already excel, which would be like AoE, right? That's what they're saying there. Also, it is a buff to Prot Warriors, which is good. Prot Warrior does need a little bit of help. Again, they're perceived to be the worst tank in the game right now. So, that's it. So ARMS gets a buff. Outlaw gets a buff to their single target and AoE. Arms gets a buff to single target, essentially. Rogue gets a buff to everything. Windwalker gets a buff to single target. Arcane Mage gets a buff just in general, but mostly to single target, depending on what talents you're running. I would say to single target. Beastmaster gets a buff all around. AoE for sure, but 4% more damage across the board. And then there's the tank stuff. So really, really good buffs. And here's what I want to talk about. These buffs are good. This is the direction that Blizzard should be going with the game. They should be buffing underperforming classes and specs. And it's really wonderful that they're doing this. It's good that they're even putting notes in here to tell us why they are doing it. This has been a consistent theme from Blizzard over the last month or so, that they are constantly making changes, and they are telling us about why they're making those changes. And that's a really important thing to say, that it's not just that they're making changes and not explaining it. They're explaining their changes. They're telling us that they're listening to feedback. All this is really, really good stuff for the direction of Blizzard in general. It's really, really awesome to see this. And they never make changes like this mid-expansion. When's the last time you've seen Blizzard make this sweeping of a change on different classes in the middle of an expansion? It doesn't happen, guys. It just doesn't happen. So clearly Blizzard has turned a new leaf here and over a new leaf, and they're prepared to make these kinds of incredible changes, which is very, very good. Let's move over to these two tabs really quick. I want to talk about the Mythic Plus perception problem for a second, and I want to talk about like why these buffs even came in the first place. All the classes that got buffed are perceived to be bad, and they're not played at the highest level. They're perceived to be bad because they're on these different charts that sites like Wowhead and Warcraft Logs and even Raider.io puts out, where you've got Outlaw Rogue, Beastmaster Hunter, Arms Warrior, and Windwalker Monk all at the bottom of like the raid DPS pool. And then if you come over here to the Mythic Plus stuff, you can see if we go to melee DPS, Outlaw Rogue literally doesn't even show up here. There literally are no Outlaw Rogues, okay, like at all. Feral Druids at 0.7%. Rep Paladins in the absolute dumpster. Arms Warrior is 0.5% of the representation. If you go to range DPS, as we were saying, Arcane Mage is 1.3%, and Affliction Warlock is 0.1% of the representation. Shadow Priest is obviously very low as well. It's basically just Destrolock and Frost Mage and some Fire Mage as well. Now, this is a perception problem. Let me explain why. I'm showing you these stats right now. Look at how crappy these things are. If you were to ask me if you were to ask the average player, what would you expect a Mythic Plus comp to look like? They would tell you Blood Death Knight, Holy Priest, or Shaman, but generally Holy Priest, Destro Warlock, Survival Hunter, and then the 5th slot is usually up for grabs. It's usually a Windwalker Monk. So let's see how that holds up. Look at this. Survival Hunter, 37%. Oh, Sub Rogue is why. I forgot to say Sub Rogue. Sub Rogue is usually that 5th slot. If not, it's Windwalker Monk. We've got Survival Hunters at 37%, 20% for Sub Rogue, 12% for Windwalker Monks. Range DPS, Destrolock clearly, very, very clearly above and beyond everybody else. Let's look at healers. You do have Shamans here, and you have Holy Priests. And then if you look at tanks, you have Death Knights, Blood Death Knights. So if you were to just go onto this site and look at this information, or better yet, if you were to publish this information on a public website for everybody to look at, i.e., these are the raid ones, but this is the raid stuff, this is the DPS stuff. These are on public websites that everybody goes and looks at. Your perception of a Prot Warrior would be that they suck and that I shouldn't play Prot Warrior. Your perception of a Feral Druid, sorry, even a Balanced Druid, is that I should not play Balanced Druid. Feral Druid literally doesn't even show up on this chart. Outlaw Rogue doesn't show up on this chart. Rep Paladin is 0.5%. Shadow Priest is 1%. I should not play Balanced Druid, Feral Druid, Outlaw Rogue, Shadow Priest, Rep Paladin, Arms Warrior. Even Elemental Shamans are in the dumpster. There's not even a percentage there. 0% on Afflock. I shouldn't play these classes because they're clearly bad. When that is actually not true. That's actually not true. Because what we're not really being shown is the actual representation of what's going on here. What you can see right here with this little lever is that this is looking at Mythic Plus level 25 and up. This is like the top 1% of all people in the world. But this is the information that we get shown most frequently. We get shown the plus 25s and up. Who's doing a plus 25 key? I'm not. You're not. Like, the average player is not doing plus 25 keys. Those are really, really high. The MDI was done on like plus 23s and plus 24s, I think. So what happens if we change this? What happens if we go to like Mythic plus 15? Oh my god, look at that. Suddenly, the representation becomes a lot more even keel. All 3 Hunter specs are there. Sub Rogue is still at the top. Fury Warrior's up there, but Arms Warrior is there now. Rep Paladin, suddenly at 4%. Suddenly, Demo locks are almost catching up with Destruction locks. Demon Hunters are way up there now. Like, do you see? That's just the DPS. Look at the healers. The healer spread is a lot better. You got Resto Druid, Paladin, Holy Priest, Shaman. Still, Mistweaver Monks and Discipline Priests are like not played as much. But again, it doesn't mean that they're bad. But you can see there's better representation here. When we look at tanks, it's way more representative, right across the board. Death Knight's not even the top anymore. You got Paladins, Druids. Everybody's within like 3% of each other, except for Prot Paladins. And of course, Warriors are still below there. Even the Warriors are still low here. Okay? Even though Mistweavers are still low and Disc Priests are still low. Even though you still have Feral Druids down here, Afflocks, Arcane Mages, and Outlaw Rogues are still way down at the bottom. There's better representation here now, and it doesn't mean that these classes are outright bad. The problem with these different like websites, and like they're good for lots of reasons, but they're bad for this reason. We are only ever shown this information. This is all we are ever shown. And you can see that there are like certain classes that you should play and certain classes that you should not play according to these numbers. And it really skews the public perception of a Mistweaver monk, of a Feral Druid, of a Shadow Priest, of an Afflock, of a Rep Paladin. It skews all of our understanding of how well these classes and specs are performing. The reality is, there are lots of Rep Paladins that are absolutely crushing Mythic Plus, and they're doing more damage than you and I are. There's examples like this, the Rogue I wanted to give you. This guy has another video where he does a plus 25 key in a miss, but this is a plus 20 Plaguefall for an Outlaw Rogue, and he does perfectly fine. He's doing tons and tons of damage. So, this is a huge problem in our community, and this is what I want to talk about with you guys. This is the discussion I want us to have. What do you think about these websites like Raider.io and Warcraft Logs showing us all this information? Like, do you think that this is a good thing? Do you think that it helps with perception? Because I know that some players love just looking at these numbers and then picking and choosing which class they want to play. I do know some players who are like, okay, I'm going to play DPS this tier. What's the best DPS I can possibly play? Looks like it's Survival Hunter or Destro Lock. I'm going to pick one of those two, and I'm not going to play anything else for the tier, and that's it. And some people genuinely enjoy playing the game like that. But I would argue to you, the vast majority of players enjoy playing the game on whatever spec they want to play. They play Outlaw Rogue. They play Survival Hunter before it was cool. They play Enhancement Shaman. They want to play Arcane Mage. They want to play Afflock. And when you get into the game, if you're an Affliction Warlock applying to keys, you will not get into any keys. You just won't. My Enhancement Shaman still has trouble getting into keys, and I'm almost 3k IO. I'm at like 2950 or something. Like, I still have trouble getting into pugs. Because the perception of classes is so terrible because of the numbers that get put up here. If you look at all Mythic Plus levels, it literally evens itself out. I mean, that's not the best representation, let's say. But if you go to 15s and up, I mean, this is pretty good, guys. You can see all the different specs are represented in some way here. There's no specs that are left out. But the information that we get, like it's disseminated down from the pros, is that you can't play XYZ. You have to play Death Knight, Windwalker Monk, Sub Rogue, Destro Lock, and either Holy Priest or Shaman, Resto Shaman. I think it's just a huge, huge problem. The player base is told what classes are best based on these charts that we get. And really all we're looking at here is the top 1% of all people. It's not a representation of who we actually are. It's not a representation of all the actual players. So again, back to my argument that I made in the previous video. I think you guys need to play whatever classes that you want to play. Play what you're comfortable playing, and you will play better than playing whatever the meta classes that you're supposed to play. You will just play better. I guarantee it. And I think that I just want to make sure that everybody understands that these charts are misleading. It's misleading, and it's a little disingenuous to say, hey, look at this. Look at this. Look at the tank representation in all of Shadowlands. No, it's not. This is the tank representation in 25 keys and up, which nobody's doing except for the top 1% of people, which I'm not. I'll readily admit that I'm not. I'm pushing into plus 20s now. But even if you just go to 20s, look at the representation. It changes so dramatically. So dramatically. Like, it's just crazy, the perception that gets passed down to the players, and I want to make sure we try and curb some of that. I want you guys to be aware that these perceptions are kind of wrong. If they're only showing you, you know, this tab right here, then it's just really disingenuous. So this is a very difficult thing that is very hard, especially in pugs, because in pugs it's all public perception. That's all it is. That's all you have. And if you're playing something that's off meta, I'm tipping my hat off to you, but it's going to be difficult to do. But I want us to start to change the narrative a little bit with these kinds of things, that these don't represent everything that's going on. And it's a little frustrating. Even, I think, Raider.io and Warcraft Logs says as much. I think it's right here, actually. Wowhead even says it right up here. They say, perspective, there is inherent biases in looking at the data. This is an incomplete picture of Season 3 balance. But they're still posting pictures of it. So even though you're telling people that it's an incomplete picture of the Season 3 balance, you're still posting pictures of it, and that's all people care about. People are going to look at this picture, and they're going to make their determination based on these pictures because you're posting them. So I just want us to all be aware that this information is kind of misleading. And that at the end of the day, if you play whichever class you're comfortable with, if you play whichever class you're good at, you're going to perform better than if you're playing whatever the meta says that you should play. And I just want us to all be aware of that. And I want to hear what you guys think about this. This is a massive topic of discussion in for me. Like I'm really passionate about this. This is why this video is so long. But I just I want you guys to tell me what you think about this. First of all, what do you think about the class tuning changes? Really, really good stuff, I think, in general. Good to bring up the perceived bottom of the barrel classes. And then on top of that, what do you think about the perception problem in World of Warcraft in general? Is there a perception problem here, or do you think it's perfectly fine? Let me know in the comments down below. Let's get a discussion going. I really want to talk about it. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this kind of stuff, drop a like down below and subscribe if you haven't already. I have a Patreon link down below as well. If you want to support the future of what I'm doing on this channel, then check out the Patreon link. I would really appreciate it. Until the next one, guys, we'll see you later.